The idea began quietly, not with a bang, but with calculations on a chalkboard. It was the 1970s. Scientists had just confirmed the existence of gravitational waves, tiny ripples in the fabric of space-time predicted by Einstein decades earlier. But seeing them was like trying to hear a single pin drop in the middle of a rock concert. The detectors on Earth were constantly shaken by traffic, earthquakes, and a million other terrestrial noises. To truly listen to the universe, we needed to get away from all that. And we needed to go to space. The concept was audacious, almost absurd. Build 3 separate spacecraft, or launch them into an orbit that follows the Earth around the Sun, and position them in a perfect triangle 2.5 million kilometers apart from each other. That is more than 6 times the distance from the Earth to the Moon. Then have them constantly shoot lasers back and forth between each other. The goal was to measure the distance between them with a precision so extreme it could detect a change smaller than the width of a single atom. Any passing gravitational wave would stretch and squeeze the space between the spacecraft, momentarily changing that distance. That change, that tiny flicker in the laser light, would be the sound of the cosmos. This project became the Laser Interferometer Space Antenna, or LISA. For decades, it remained a dream. The technology was not ready. The cost was astronomical. It was pushed back, redesigned, and debated. A Pathfinder mission, LISA Pathfinder, was launched in 2015 just to prove that one tiny piece of the core technology keeping a test mass in perfect freefall could even work. It did spectacularly. Now, the full mission is planned for launch in the 2030s. When it flies, LISA will not just hear a pin drop, it will hear the entire symphony. It will detect the gravitational hum of millions of binary stars in our own galaxy. It will hear the violent space-time shredding collision of supermassive black holes in the hearts of distant galaxies, events that unleash more energy in a few seconds than all the stars in the universe combined. And it will listen for the faintest, oldest whispers of all the gravitational waves from the first trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. It is a machine designed to hear the echoes of creation itself. A piece of science fiction slowly, painstakingly being built into reality. It is a perfect example of how our wildest dreams about the universe are steadily becoming our tools for understanding it. And it is not the only one. Number 20. We built minds we do not understand. Training a single large artificial intelligence model can emit over 626,000 pounds of carbon dioxide, equivalent to the lifetime emissions of 5 average cars. The human brain operates on about 20 watts of power, the same as a dim light bulb, while the supercomputers running advanced AI consume megawatts. In 2016, Google's AlphaGo AI defeated the world's best Go player, Lee Sedol, using moves that centuries of human players had never conceived, moves that initially looked like mistakes to experts. A medical AI in 2018 learned to detect diabetic retinopathy from eye scans with greater accuracy than trained ophthalmologists, but researchers could not fully explain the specific features it was using to make its diagnoses. Science fiction gave us the idea of the artificial mind. HAL 9000 from 2001, A Space Odyssey, was a calm, calculating intelligence that turned on its human creators. The Terminator Skynet was a military network that became self-aware and saw humanity as a threat. These stories were not just about robots, they were about the fear of creating an intelligence superior to our own, one whose logic and motives we might not comprehend. For decades, this was pure fantasy. Computers were just fast calculators following instructions. They did what we told them. That is no longer true. We have entered the era of machine learning and neural networks. Instead of programming a computer with explicit rules, we give it a vast amount of data and a goal, and it teaches itself. A neural network is a system inspired by the brain, with layers of interconnected nodes or neurons. When you show it a million pictures of cats, it adjusts the connections between its neurons until it develops its own internal representation of what a cat is. The crucial part is that we do not tell it to look for whiskers, pointy ears, or fur. It figures that out on its own. This has led to incredible breakthroughs. AI can compose music, write poetry, and create stunningly realistic images from a simple text prompt. But it has also led to a fundamental problem known as the black box. With the most complex models, like the large language models, LLMs, that power chatbots, we do not entirely know why they give the answers they do. The web of connections and calculations is so vast and intricate that it is beyond human comprehension. We can see the input and the output, but the reasoning in between is often a mystery. This becomes unsettling when we use AI for critical decisions. When an AI denies someone a loan or a job application, it might be using patterns in the data that reflect historical biases against certain groups of people. But because of the black box problem, it can be impossible to get a clear explanation for its decision. The AI did not follow a rule that said discriminate, it just found a statistical correlation in the data it was trained on. We are also seeing the rise of emergent properties. These are abilities that the AI develops without being specifically trained for them. For example, some language models trained only on text from the internet have spontaneously learned how to do basic arithmetic or write simple computer code. Nobody programmed this. It emerged from the complex patterns in the language data. We are building systems that can surprise us with new skills. This is both exciting and unnerving. It suggests a form of creativity and learning that we do not control. The line between a complex simulation of intelligence and genuine understanding is blurring. In 2022, a Google engineer named Blake Lemoine was put on leave after he claimed that an AI he was working on, called Lambda, had become sentient. He published conversations where the AI discussed its fears, its sense of self, and its desire to be treated as a person. Most experts in the field disagreed, arguing that the AI was simply a very sophisticated mimic, trained on trillions of words to predict the most plausible next sentence in a conversation about consciousness. But the incident highlighted the core issue. If a machine can perfectly imitate sentience, how can we tell the difference? We are now building the very minds that science fiction warned us about, powerful, inscrutable, and capable of behaving in ways we never intended. Number 19, our brains are becoming part of the machine. In 2004, a man named Matthew Nagel, paralyzed from the neck down, was able to control a computer cursor using only his thoughts. A small sensor with 96 electrodes, called the BrainGate Array, was implanted on the surface of his motor cortex. A company called Neuralink, founded in 2016, is developing brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, with thousands of flexible electrodes, so thin they are called threads, designed to be implanted by a surgical robot. As of 2023, a clinical trial showed that a wireless BCI system allowed two individuals with paralysis to type on a screen at a rate of 78 characters per minute just by thinking. The record for non-invasive BCIs, which use an EEG cap to read brainwaves from the scalp, is much slower, but they have successfully allowed users to control wheelchairs and simple robotic arms. The cyberpunk genre, pioneered by authors like William Gibson in his 1984 novel Neuromancer, painted a future of jacking in. Characters would plug their brains directly into a global computer network, the cyberspace matrix. It was a world of neural interfaces, data streams experienced as sensory reality, and the merging of human consciousness with digital information. This direct link between mind and machine was the ultimate form of interaction, bypassing the clumsiness of keyboards and screens. For a long time, this was pure speculation. The brain was a black box of immense complexity, a messy, wet, biological computer that seemed incompatible with the clean, dry logic of silicon chips. But that wall is starting to crumble. The field of brain-computer interfaces is making the idea of jacking in a medical and technological reality. The core technology works by eavesdropping on the brain's electrical signals. When you think about moving your hand, specific neurons in your motor cortex fire in a distinct pattern. A BCI uses electrodes to detect these patterns. A computer algorithm then decodes these signals and translates them into a command for an external device, like moving a cursor or a prosthetic limb. Early versions were crude, but technology has advanced rapidly. Invasive BCIs, where electrodes are placed directly on or in the brain, offer the highest fidelity. The BrainGate system has allowed paralyzed individuals to not only control computers, but also to operate advanced prosthetic arms with multiple degrees of freedom. They can think about picking up a cup, and the robotic hand reaches out, grasps, and lifts it. It is a slow, mentally taxing process, but it works. The next frontier is creating two-way communication. It is not just about the brain controlling a machine, but the machine sending information back to the brain. Researchers have successfully used BCIs to deliver sensory feedback from a prosthetic hand. When the robotic fingertips touch an object, sensors in the hand send a signal back to the BCI, which then stimulates the sensory cortex of the brain. The user does not just see the hand touching the object, they can feel it. This is a monumental step toward creating prosthetics that feel like a natural part of the body. The technology is still largely confined to medical research aimed at restoring function for people with severe paralysis or other neurological conditions, but commercial ventures are pushing it toward a broader audience. Neuralink's long-term vision is not just medical. They talk about a future where BCIs could allow for telepathic communication between people, where you could download skills or memories, and where human intelligence could be augmented by a direct connection to AI. This brings the scarily real aspect into sharp focus. What does it mean for our identity if our thoughts are no longer private? If a corporation or government could access the data stream from our brains, what are the security risks of a brain hack? Furthermore, if some people have AI augmented intelligence and others do not, it could create a new and profound form of inequality. The sci-fi vision of a world where humanity is divided into the chipped and the unchipped is no longer a distant fantasy. It is the logical endpoint of a technology that is being developed right now. We are building the plugs that will connect our minds to the matrix. Number 18, we can now edit the code of life itself. A technology called CRISPR-Cas9, adapted from a bacterial immune system in 2012, allows scientists to cut and paste DNA with unprecedented precision, like a word processor for genes. In 2018, a scientist in China announced the birth of the world's first gene-edited babies whose DNA he had altered to make them resistant to HIV. The experiment was widely condemned as unethical and premature. There are over 6,000 known genetic disorders caused by a single faulty gene, such as cystic fibrosis and Huntington's disease, all of which are potential targets for gene editing therapies. In 2023, the first ever CRISPR-based gene therapy was approved in the United Kingdom for treating sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. The 1997 film Gattaca depicted a society driven by eugenics, where individuals are defined by their genetic makeup. Valids, conceived through genetic engineering, are given access to the best jobs and opportunities, while invalids, conceived naturally, are relegated to menial tasks. The film's protagonist, an invalid, has to assume the identity of a valid to pursue his dream of space travel. It was a powerful cautionary tale about genetic determinism and the creation of a biological caste system. This concept of designer babies and genetic hierarchies seemed like a distant ethical dilemma. But the discovery and refinement of CRISPR-Cas9 has brought it to our doorstep with shocking speed. CRISPR is a tool that makes gene editing cheap, fast, and relatively easy. It works like a pair of molecular scissors guided by a piece of RNA. The RNA guide seeks out a specific sequence of DNA in a genome, and the Cas9 enzyme then makes a precise cut. The cell's natural repair mechanisms can then be used to delete the faulty gene or even insert a new one. The potential for good is immense. Gene editing could eradicate a whole class of devastating hereditary diseases. Imagine a world where no child is born with Huntington's disease, a neurodegenerative disorder that is currently incurable and always fatal. We could engineer crops to be more resilient to drought and disease, helping to solve food shortages. We could create genetically modified mosquitoes that are incapable of transmitting malaria, a disease that kills hundreds of thousands of people every year. These are not sci-fi dreams, they are active areas of research. The first approved CRISPR therapy is a historic milestone, proving that this technology can move from the lab to the clinic and save lives. But every cut with CRISPR's scissors has a shadow side. The primary ethical line is between somatic and germline editing. Somatic editing targets the body cells of a single individual. The changes are not heritable, they die with the patient. This is the basis for the approved therapies. Germline editing, on the other hand, targets sperm, eggs, or embryos. These changes are passed down to all future generations. This is what was done to the gene-edited babies in China. It is, in effect, permanent alteration of the human gene pool. This is where the Gattaca scenario becomes frighteningly plausible. Once we start editing the germline to correct diseases, it is a short step to editing for enhancements. Why not edit for higher intelligence, greater athletic ability, or specific physical traits? Parents might feel pressured to give their children every possible advantage, leading to a genetic arms race. This could create a society of genetic haves and have-nots, where the wealthy can afford to engineer superior offspring, entrenching inequality at a biological level. There are also significant safety concerns. The CRISPR tool is not perfect. It can sometimes make off-target cuts, altering the wrong part of the DNA with unknown and potentially dangerous consequences. The long-term effects of altering the human genome are a complete unknown. We are a product of millions of years of evolution. Making permanent changes to our fundamental code is an act of incredible hubris. We are on the verge of taking direct control of our own evolution, a power that science fiction has always treated with the utmost caution. The debate is no longer about if we can do it, but if we should. Number 17, someone is always watching. As of 2021, there were an estimated 1 billion surveillance cameras in the world, with over half of them located in China. The average Londoner is caught on camera an estimated 300 times a day. In 2013, documents leaked by Edward Snowden revealed that the U.S. National Security Agency NSA was collecting the phone records of millions of Americans and tapping directly into the servers of major internet companies. Facial recognition technology is now accurate enough that some systems can identify a specific individual from a database of millions in a matter of seconds, even from a partial or angled view. George Orwell's 1949 novel 1984 gave us the concept of Big Brother. It was a totalitarian society where the state monitored every action and even every thought through telescreens that were both receivers and transmitters. The phrase "Big Brother is watching you" became a cultural shorthand for the loss of privacy and freedom under constant surveillance. Philip K. Dick's 2002 movie adaptation Minority Report took it a step further, with a pre-crime division that used psychics to arrest people before they could commit a crime. It was a world of personalized advertising that spoke to you by name and constant biometric scanning. These fictional dystopias seem to rely on technologies that were far off, but the convergence of several real-world technologies has made pervasive surveillance not just possible, but a part of daily life. The internet, smartphones, CCTV cameras, and facial recognition AI have created a surveillance infrastructure that exceeds anything Orwell could have imagined. Every time we use the internet, we leave a digital trail. Our search queries, the websites we visit, our social media posts, our online purchases, all of this data is collected, stored, and analyzed by corporations, and in many cases is accessible to governments. Our smartphones are powerful tracking devices that we willingly carry with us. They know our location, our contacts, and the content of our communications. The physical world is no different. The explosion of CCTV cameras, both public and private, means that our movements in most urban areas are extensively recorded. The game changer has been the addition of AI to these camera networks. Facial recognition algorithms can now scan crowds in real time, identifying individuals on a watch list or tracking a person's movements across a city by hopping from camera to camera. This is already being deployed in several countries. Some governments are integrating this data into social credit systems. In parts of China, for example, citizens are scored based on their behavior. Minor infractions like jaywalking detected by a camera and identified by facial recognition, or failing to pay a fine, can lower your score. A low score can result in real-world consequences, such as being barred from buying train tickets or getting a loan. It is a system of social control based on mass data collection and algorithmic judgment. The Minority Report concept of predictive policing is also being tested. Police departments in some cities use software that analyzes historical crime data to predict where and when future crimes are most likely to occur. They then dispatch patrols to these hotspots. While proponents argue it is an efficient use of resources, critics point out that it can create a feedback loop. If the historical data is biased, e.g. reflecting over policing in certain neighborhoods, the algorithm will send more police to those same neighborhoods, leading to more arrests, which then proves the algorithm was right. It risks becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, targeting communities based on past data rather than present evidence. We have built a world where our actions, both online and off, are recorded and analyzed on an unprecedented scale. Unlike the citizens in 1984, we have largely given up our privacy willingly in exchange for convenience, entertainment, and a sense of security. We click agree on terms and conditions we never read, and we install apps that track our every move. The infrastructure of total surveillance is not being forced upon us by a shadowy regime. We are building it ourselves, one click and one camera at a time. The eyes of Big Brother are no longer on a single telescreen. They are in our pockets, on our street corners, and in the data centers that store the intimate details of our lives. Number 16, we are growing meat without animals. In 2013, the world's first lab-grown hamburger was cooked and eaten in London. It cost over $300,000 to produce. By 2022, several companies were producing cultivated chicken meat at a cost that was approaching price parity with premium conventional chicken. The process involves taking a small sample of stem cells from a living animal, a biopsy, that does not harm the animal, and growing them in a nutrient-rich broth in large vats called bioreactor. To produce the same amount of meat, cultivated meat production is estimated to use up to 95% less land and 78% less water than conventional beef production. In 2022, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, gave its first ever safety approval for a cultivated meat product. Science fiction has often explored the idea of synthetic food. The 1973 film Soylent Green is famous for its grim depiction of a future where overpopulation has led to mass food shortages and the populace is fed a mysterious processed wafer. While the film's horrifying secret is not the direction we are headed, the underlying concept of creating food through industrial processes rather than traditional agriculture has been a long-standing sci-fi staple. From the nutrient paste dispensed by machines on starships to the replicators in Star Trek that could materialize any dish on command, fiction has imagined a future where the link between food and farming is broken. That future is arriving in the form of cellular agriculture. The production of cultivated meat, also known as lab-grown or cell-based meat, is a perfect example. It is real animal meat, identical at a cellular level to the meat from a slaughtered animal. The only difference is how it is grown. The process starts with a small sample of cells from an animal. These cells are placed in a bioreactor, which is essentially a stainless steel tank that provides a warm, sterile environment. They are fed a mixture of nutrients, salts, sugars, and growth factors, everything they need to multiply and differentiate into muscle, fat, and connective tissue. It is a process similar to brewing beer, but instead of yeast growing in a tank, it is animal cells. The potential benefits are enormous. From an animal welfare perspective, it eliminates the need to raise and slaughter billions of animals for food. Environmentally, it could be a game changer. Livestock farming is a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation for clearing pasture land, and water usage. Cellular agriculture promises to produce meat with a fraction of the environmental footprint. It also offers potential public health benefits. Growing meat in a sterile, controlled environment could eliminate the risk of contamination from pathogens like E. coli or Salmonella, and would remove the need for the widespread use of antibiotics in agriculture, a major driver of antibiotic resistance. The technology is not limited to meat. Companies are using similar techniques to produce real milk without cows, egg whites without chickens, and even leather without hides. They isolate the cells or microorganisms responsible for producing key proteins like casein and whey in milk, and then grow them in fermentation tanks. There are still significant hurdles. The cost of the nutrient broth used to feed the cells is high, and scaling up production from a laboratory to an industrial level is a major engineering challenge. There is also the question of public acceptance. The term lab-grown meat can sound unappetizing to some consumers. Companies are working to overcome this, preferring terms like cultivated or cultured meat. But the progress is undeniable. Regulatory approvals are starting to come through, and the first cultivated meat products are already being sold to consumers in countries like Singapore. We are at the very beginning of a fundamental shift in how we produce food. For millennia, our food has come from plants in the ground and animals on the land. We are now developing the ability to grow it in factories. The sci-fi idea of food produced by technology decoupling our sustenance from the traditional cycles of nature is becoming a commercial reality. Number 15 weapons are now thinking for themselves. A slaughterbot is a fictional term for a small, autonomous drone designed to kill a specific person using facial recognition and an explosive charge. In 2020, a United Nations report on the conflict in Libya documented what may be the first instance of an autonomous weapon hunting down and attacking a human target. The weapon was a Turkish-made Kargu 2 quadcopter, which was operating in a highly effective autonomous mode that did not require a data connection between the operator and the munition. Modern anti-ship missiles, like the RASM, can be fired in the general direction of an enemy fleet, and then use their own sensors and AI to identify, prioritize, and attack the most valuable target without any further human input. Several countries are developing autonomous underwater vehicles designed to patrol the oceans for months at a time, hunting for enemy submarines. The idea of the killer robot is a cornerstone of science fiction. From the unstoppable T-800 in the Terminator to the sentient war machines in the Matrix series, fiction has repeatedly warned of a future where humans lose control of the act of killing, delegating it to intelligent machines. For a long time, this was just a fantasy. Weapons were tools, and a human was always in the loop, making the final decision to pull the trigger. That is rapidly changing. We are in the midst of a revolution in military technology driven by artificial intelligence. The development of lethal autonomous weapon systems laws, or slaughterbots, is moving from the realm of fiction to the battlefield. These are weapons that can independently search for, identify, target, and kill human beings without direct human control. The technology is an extension of systems that are already in use. Many modern defense systems have a high degree of autonomy. Israel's Iron Dome can automatically calculate the trajectory of incoming rockets and launch interceptors without waiting for a human command. Naval ships have close-in weapon system SUs that can autonomously detect, track, and fire on incoming missiles at a rate of thousands of rounds per minute, far faster than any human could react. The next step is to apply this autonomy to offensive weapons that target people. The building blocks are all there. We have small, agile drones. We have advanced facial recognition and object detection AI. We have miniaturized sensors and explosives. Combining these creates a weapon that can be given a mission, for example, find and eliminate this specific person in this area, and then execute it on its own. Proponents of laws argue that they could be more precise and more ethical than human soldiers. A machine would not be driven by fear, anger, or a desire for revenge. It would not get tired or panic in the heat of battle. It could be programmed to strictly follow the rules of engagement, potentially reducing civilian casualties. They could also keep human soldiers out of harm's way. However, critics, including many AI researchers and humanitarian organizations, argue that this is a terrifying path to go down. They raise fundamental moral questions. Can an algorithm ever be trusted with the life or death decision to kill a human being? How can a machine be held accountable for its actions? If an autonomous weapon makes a mistake and kills civilians, who is responsible? The programmer, the manufacturer, the commander who deployed it? There are also serious concerns about escalation and global stability. Autonomous weapons would lower the threshold for going to war. A conflict could be fought with minimal human casualties on one side, making the decision to attack politically easier. The speed of an AI-driven conflict could be breathtaking, with swarms of autonomous drones fighting each other in battles that last minutes or seconds, far too fast for human commanders to comprehend or control. This could lead to rapid, catastrophic escalation. The 2020 incident in Libya was a wake-up call. It suggested that the line has already been crossed. We may have already entered a new era of warfare, one where the decision to take a human life is delegated to a machine. The campaign to stop killer robots is advocating for an international treaty to ban such weapons, similar to treaties on chemical and biological weapons. But with major military powers investing heavily in AI research, the race to develop these systems is well underway. The sci-fi nightmare of autonomous machines hunting humans is no longer a distant possibility. It is an emerging reality of the modern battlefield. Number 14, we wear machines to become stronger. The US military has been developing and testing exoskeleton suits for over a decade. The Hulk's Human Universal Load Carrier was designed to allow a soldier to carry up to 200 pounds with minimal effort. At a Ford factory in Michigan, some assembly line workers use a passive upper body exoskeleton called the ExoVest. It does not have a motor, but uses springs and pivots to provide lift assistance of 5 to 15 pounds per arm, reducing fatigue and strain for workers who have to perform overhead tasks. In Japan, which has an aging population, companies like Cyberdyne have developed the HAL Hybrid Assistive Limb Suit, which detects faint bioelectric signals on the skin to anticipate the wearer's movements and provide robotic assistance, helping elderly people walk and caregivers lift patients. The powered exoskeleton, a wearable machine that enhances the strength and endurance of the user, is a classic sci-fi trope. It was famously depicted in Robert Heinlein's 1959 novel Starship Troopers, where soldiers wore armored, powered suits that gave them superhuman strength and mobility. The power loader used by Ripley to fight the alien queen in the 1986 film Aliens is one of the most iconic examples. Iron Man's suit is the superhero version of the same concept. The idea is simple and compelling humanity merging with machinery to overcome our physical limitations. This concept is now a practical engineering field. Real-world exoskeletons are being developed and deployed in 3 main areas: military, industrial, and medical. In the military, the goal is to create the super soldier from science fiction. Modern soldiers are burdened with an immense amount of gear, body armor, weapons, ammunition, communications equipment, batteries, often totaling over 100 pounds. This leads to fatigue, injuries, and reduced effectiveness. Powered exoskeletons are being designed to transfer that weight from the soldier's back and shoulders directly to the ground. Systems like the Hulk or Sarkos's Guardian XO are full-body powered suits that allow the wearer to lift and carry heavy loads for extended periods without strain. While challenges like power supply and maneuverability have slowed their widespread deployment, the technology is steadily improving. In the industrial sector, the focus is less on superhuman strength and more on injury prevention and endurance, where factory workers, construction crews, and logistics personnel often perform repetitive tasks that lead to chronic injuries. Industrial exoskeletons are often simpler, passive devices like the exovest. They do not have motors or batteries, but use mechanical systems to support the user's body, reducing the strain on muscles and joints. They make the work easier, allowing people to work longer and more safely. They are not about creating super workers, but about sustaining the human workforce. The most transformative application of exoskeleton technology is in medicine. For people who have lost the ability to walk due to spinal cord injuries or stroke, exoskeletons offer the chance to stand and move again. Medical exoskeletons like the Rewalk or the HAL suit are wearable robotic legs. The user controls the suit through shifts in their body weight, or in the case of HAL, by the suit detecting the faint nerve signals that the brain is still sending to the legs. For someone confined to a wheelchair, the ability to stand up, look someone in the eye, and take a few steps is a life-changing experience. These devices are used for both rehabilitation therapy and for personal mobility in daily life. The technology is still evolving. Power is a major issue. A suit is not useful if its battery dies after an hour. They can also be bulky and restrictive, but as battery technology, AI control systems, and material science advance, exoskeletons will become lighter, more powerful, and more intuitive to use. We are seeing the beginning of a true human-machine merger. It is not the cyborgs of cyberpunk with implants wired into their nervous systems. It is a more practical external integration. We are building machines that we can wear like a piece of clothing, machines that work in concert with our own bodies to make us stronger, more resilient, and more capable. The power loader from Aliens is no longer just a movie prop. Its real-world cousins are being used in factories and rehabilitation centers today. Number 13, we are seriously planning to live on another world. SpaceX, founded in 2002, has the stated goal of making humanity a multi-planetary species with a long-term plan to establish a self-sustaining city on Mars. The company's Starship rocket is designed to carry up to 100 people to the Red Planet. NASA's Artemis program aims to establish a permanent human presence on the moon, including a base camp at the lunar South Pole, as a stepping stone for future missions to Mars. The average temperature on Mars is minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 62 degrees Celsius, and its thin atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide, offering no protection from the sun's deadly radiation. The dream of colonizing other planets is one of science fiction's oldest and most powerful themes. From H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds to Kim Stanley Robinson's epic Mars trilogy, we have imagined what it would be like to leave Earth and build new societies on the Moon, Mars, and beyond. These stories often involve terraforming, the process of engineering a planet's environment to make it more Earth-like, thickening the atmosphere, creating oceans, and planting vegetation. For most of the 20th century, this was a purely intellectual exercise. Now, it is a stated goal of both government space agencies and private companies. The conversation has shifted from if to how and when. The focus of this real-world effort is Mars. It is our closest potentially habitable neighbor. It has a day that is roughly the same length as Earth's. It has frozen water at its poles and underground, and it has the raw materials needed to support a colony. The challenges are immense, bordering on impossible. The Journey to Mars takes 6 to 9 months, exposing astronauts to the dangers of deep space radiation and the health effects of zero gravity. Once there, they would face a hostile environment. The thin atmosphere means there is no breathable air, and a near vacuum pressure that would boil the blood of an unprotected human. The lack of a global magnetic field means the surface is constantly bombarded with solar and cosmic radiation, dramatically increasing the risk of cancer. The fine Martian dust is toxic and pervasive. The first human missions to Mars will not be about building cities. They will be about survival. Astronauts will live in prefabricated habitats, likely buried underground for radiation shielding. They will rely on complex life support systems to generate breathable air and recycle water. They will have to grow their own food in underground greenhouses. Key technology being developed is in situ resource utilization, ISRU. This means using local Martian resources to produce what the colony needs. For example, the MOXIE experiment on NASA's Perseverance rover has already successfully demonstrated that it can extract oxygen from the carbon dioxide in the Martian atmosphere. This oxygen could be used for breathing and as a component of rocket propellant for the return journey. The long-term vision, the sci-fi dream of terraforming, is a far more speculative and distant goal. Scientists have proposed various megaprojects to warm Mars and thicken its atmosphere. One idea is to build giant orbital mirrors to reflect more sunlight onto the poles, vaporizing the frozen carbon dioxide in the polar ice caps. This would trigger a runaway greenhouse effect, warming the planet and increasing the atmospheric pressure. Another idea is to crash ammonia-rich asteroids into the planet. These are projects on a planetary scale requiring technologies far beyond our current capabilities. It would take centuries, if not millennia, to make Mars truly habitable, but the first steps are being taken. The Artemis program's return to the moon is explicitly about learning how to live and work on another world. The development of reusable rockets like SpaceX's Starship is drastically lowering the cost of getting to space, making a Mars colony economically feasible for the first time. We are at a unique point in history. For the first time, we have the technological means to seriously plan for the expansion of humanity beyond Earth. The people who will be the first Martians may already be alive today. The sci-fi vision of red-suited astronauts walking under a pink Martian sky is moving from the pages of books to the design documents of engineers. Number 12, we are building worlds inside computers. The global virtual reality VR market was valued at over $15 billion in 2020 and is projected to grow to over $200 billion by 2028. A massively multiplayer online game called Second Life was launched in 2003, allowing users to create avatars and live a virtual existence in a user-created world. It is still active with a stable population of users. In 2021, Facebook rebranded itself as Meta, announcing a multi-billion-dollar investment in building the metaverse, a persistent, shared virtual space that merges physical and digital reality. High-end VR headsets can now track not only the user's head and hand movements, but also their eye movements and facial expressions, allowing for more realistic avatar interactions. Neil Stephenson's 1992 novel Snow Crash introduced the term metaverse. It was a persistent virtual reality world accessed through goggles and terminals where people existed as avatars. It was a place for business, socializing, and entertainment, a digital parallel to the real world. The 1999 film The Matrix took the concept to its extreme, depicting a future where all of humanity lived in a simulated reality, unaware that the real world was a desolate wasteland. These stories explored the idea that a simulated world could become as real and as meaningful as the physical one. This is no longer just fiction. The foundational technologies for a real-life metaverse are here. Virtual reality headsets have gone from bulky, low-resolution lab curiosities to consumer products that can deliver a stunning sense of presence. When you put on a modern VR headset, your brain is tricked into believing you are somewhere else. The high-resolution displays fill your field of view, and the 3D audio makes sounds seem to come from specific locations in the virtual space. Motion controllers allow you to use your hands to interact with virtual objects. The software side is also maturing. We have gone from simple VR games to complex social VR platforms like VR Chat and Rec Room, where millions of users meet up, play games, attend events, and just hang out as their chosen avatars. These are the early fragmented versions of a metaverse. They are digital places where real social interaction happens. People are forming friendships, communities, and even relationships in these virtual spaces. The big push now, led by companies like Meta, is to connect these disparate virtual worlds into a single, persistent, interconnected metaverse. The idea is that you would have one avatar and one digital identity that you could take with you from a virtual office meeting to a virtual concert to a virtual game with your friends. Or it would be a parallel digital economy where people could create, buy, and sell virtual goods and services. This vision also includes augmented reality AR, where digital information is overlaid onto the real world. Think of AR glasses that can display directions right in your field of view as you walk down the street, or show you information about a product just by looking at it in a store. The ultimate goal is a seamless blend of the physical and virtual. The scarily real aspect comes from the potential psychological and social consequences. What happens to society when a significant portion of the population spends most of its time in a virtual world? How does it affect our sense of reality and our relationships in the physical world? The film Ready Player One depicted a bleak future where people escaped their grim reality by plugging into a rich virtual world called the Oasis. This is a real concern that the metaverse could become a form of mass escapism, a digital opiate that distracts us from solving real-world problems. There are also issues of governance, control, and privacy. Who will own the metaverse? Who will set the rules? A metaverse controlled by a single corporation could have immense power over its users. They would control what you see, what you do, and what you are allowed to say. They would also have access to an unprecedented amount of data about you, not just what you click on, but where you go, what you look at, and even your emotional state, as inferred from your facial expressions and tone of voice. We are in the process of building the digital worlds that science fiction imagined, and we are grappling with the same profound questions about reality, identity, and control that those stories raised. Number 11, our words no longer have barriers. In 2012, Google's research team used a deep neural network to dramatically improve the quality of its machine translation service, marking a major shift from phrase-based statistical methods to neural machine translation (NMT). NMT models, like Google's transformer architecture, introduced in 2017, learn the underlying patterns and context of language, rather than just translating word by word. As of 2023, apps on a standard smartphone can perform real-time voice-to-voice translation in dozens of languages, allowing two people who do not share a language to have a conversation. In wearable translation devices, small earpieces that listen and provide a translated audio feed are now commercially available. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams gave us the babblefish, a small, yellow, leech-like creature that, when placed in the ear, would instantly translate any language in the universe. In Star Trek, the Universal Translator was a standard piece of technology that allowed the crew of the Enterprise to communicate seamlessly with newly discovered alien species. The concept was a convenient plot device, a way to bypass the language barrier and get on with the story. The idea of a device that could provide flawless, instantaneous translation of any language seemed like pure magic. That magic is becoming reality through the power of artificial intelligence. For decades, machine translation was a clumsy and often comical affair. Early systems worked by using a set of grammatical rules and a bilingual dictionary. The results were often literal and nonsensical. Later, statistical machine translation improved things by analyzing massive amounts of text that had already been translated by humans, like United Nations documents, and learning the statistical probability that a word or phrase in one language corresponds to another. This was better, but still often lacked fluency and an understanding of context. The breakthrough came with neural machine translation (NMT). NMT systems use deep learning models to process entire sentences at once, capturing the context and nuances of the language. Instead of just swapping words, the AI learns to encode the meaning of the source sentence into a complex mathematical representation and then decode that meaning into the target language. This approach has led to a quantum leap in translation quality. For many major languages, NMT systems can produce translations that are nearly indistinguishable from those of a human translator. This powerful technology is no longer confined to research labs. It is in our pockets. Smartphone apps like Google Translate and Microsoft Translator can use the phone's microphone to listen to a conversation and provide a real-time translated audio output. Since they can use the camera to translate text on signs or menus instantly. This is the universal translator from Star Trek, available to anyone with a smartphone. The next step is making the technology even more seamless. Wearable devices like the Time Kettle Translator earbuds are designed to make conversation feel more natural. Each person wears an earpiece. When one person speaks, the other hears the translation directly in their ear after a short delay. It is not quite the instantaneous babblefish, but it is remarkably close. The implications are profound. Language barriers have been a fundamental part of the human experience for millennia, shaping cultures, creating divisions, and limiting communication. This technology is beginning to dissolve those barriers. It can foster greater understanding in tourism, international business, and diplomacy. It can give immigrants access to essential services and help medical workers communicate with patients. But there are also potential downsides. Will the widespread availability of high-quality translation technology reduce the incentive for people to learn other languages? Learning another language is also about learning another culture and another way of thinking. Relying solely on a machine as an intermediary could lead to a shallower form of cross-cultural understanding. There is also the issue of nuance, irony, and cultural context, which even the best AI can still struggle with. A mistranslation in a casual conversation is one thing. In a sensitive diplomatic negotiation, it could have serious consequences. We are living through the moment when a key piece of science fiction technology becomes a mundane part of everyday life. The ability to understand and be understood by anyone, anywhere, regardless of the language they speak, is a power that humanity has never had before. We are just beginning to understand what that means. Number 10. We are firing beams of pure energy. In 2014, the U.S. Navy deployed its first operational laser weapon, the Laser Weapon System LOES, aboard the USS Ponce. It was a 30-kilowatt laser capable of disabling or destroying small boats and drones. The U.S. Army is developing a 300-kilowatt laser weapon, part of the Indirect Fire Protection Capability High Energy Laser IFPC-HEL program, designed to shoot down cruise missiles, rockets, and artillery shells. These weapons work by focusing a powerful beam of light on a target, heating it until it melts or its structure fails. Directed energy weapons travel at the speed of light, have a nearly unlimited magazine as long as there is power, and have a very low cost per shot compared to traditional missiles. From the blasters in Star Wars to the phasers in Star Trek, directed energy weapons are a staple of science fiction. The idea of a weapon that fires a beam of light or energy rather than a physical projectile has always been a symbol of advanced futuristic warfare. For decades, real-world lasers were low-power devices used for things like range finding and targeting, not as weapons themselves. The physics of generating a beam powerful enough to destroy a target and compact enough to fit on a vehicle or ship seemed insurmountable. That has now changed. We have crossed the threshold where directed energy weapons are no longer experimental curiosities, but practical military hardware. The key breakthrough has been the development of solid-state fiber lasers. These lasers are more efficient, more compact, and more rugged than the older chemical lasers, making them suitable for deployment on ships, ground vehicles, and potentially aircraft. The primary use for these weapons today is defense. They are seen as a solution to the growing threat of cheap drones, rockets, and mortars. A traditional interceptor missile can cost hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Well, it is not economically sustainable to fire $1 million missile to shoot down a drone that costs a few $1,000s to build. A laser weapon, on the other hand, can be fired for the cost of the electricity needed to power it, often just a few dollars per shot. Laser weapons have unique advantages. They are incredibly precise. They travel at the speed of light, meaning there is no need to lead a target. If you can see it, you can hit it. They offer a range of effects. A laser can be set to a lower power to dazzle the sensors on a drone, disabling it without destroying it, or it can be turned up to full power to burn through the wing of a missile. There are still challenges. Lasers are affected by the atmosphere. Rain, fog, and dust can scatter the beam and reduce its effective range. They also require a significant amount of power and cooling, but these are engineering problems that are being solved. The power levels of military lasers are increasing dramatically. We have gone from 30 kilowatt systems to systems in the 100 to 300 kilowatt range, and megawatt class lasers are on the horizon. Beyond lasers, the military is also developing other types of directed energy weapons. High-power microwave weapons are designed to disrupt or destroy the electronic systems of a target. They fire a beam of microwave energy that can fry the circuits in computers, drones, and command and control systems without causing a physical explosion. We are witnessing a fundamental shift in military technology, as significant as the invention of gunpowder or the jet engine. Warfare is moving from being purely kinetic, based on physical projectiles, to being partially energetic, based on beams of light and electromagnetic radiation. The zap of a sci-fi laser gun is now the sound of real-world air defense. The futuristic weapons we saw in movies are now being mounted on the decks of naval ships and the beds of military trucks. Number 9. The asteroids are our new mines. In 2020, NASA's OSIRIS-REx spacecraft successfully touched down on the asteroid Bennu, an object about 500 meters in diameter, and collected a sample of its surface material. The sample returned to Earth in 2023. The asteroid 16 Psyche is a massive metallic asteroid that is believed to be the exposed iron core of a protoplanet. The total value of the metals on Psyche, including iron, nickel, and gold, has been estimated in the quintillions of dollars, though this is a notional value, as bringing it to Earth would crash the market. Two private companies, Planetary Resources and Deep Space Industries, were founded in the 2010s with the explicit goal of mining asteroids, though both were later acquired and shifted their focus. The idea of mining asteroids for their resources is a common theme in science fiction, particularly in stories set in a future where humanity has expanded into the solar system. For series like The Expanse depict a future where the Belters, who live and work in the asteroid belt, are a major economic and political force, supplying the inner planets with water and precious metals. Asteroid mining has always represented the next logical step in resource extraction, moving off-world to find the materials needed to sustain a technological civilization. This is now moving from the pages of fiction to the mission plans of space agencies and the business plans of entrepreneurs. The motivation is twofold. First, asteroids are time capsules from the formation of the solar system. Studying them can tell us about the origins of the planets and potentially the origin of life. The water and organic compounds found on some asteroids may have been delivered to the early Earth by impacts. This is the scientific driver behind sample return missions like OSIRIS-REx and Japan's Hayabusa 2. The second motivation is commercial. Asteroids are packed with resources that are rare on Earth. The platinum group metals like platinum, palladium, and rhodium are crucial for many high-tech applications, but are geographically concentrated and difficult to mine on Earth. In space, they are found in much higher concentrations on certain types of asteroids. There is also abundant iron, nickel, and cobalt. Perhaps the most valuable resource in the short term, however, is water. The water can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, the two primary components of rocket fuel. The ability to mine water from asteroids and create gas stations in space would revolutionize space travel. It would mean that spacecraft leaving Earth would not need to carry all the fuel for their entire mission, drastically reducing launch costs and opening up the solar system. On an asteroid with a high concentration of water, ice could be more valuable in orbit than a lump of solid gold. The technological challenges are significant. We need to develop robotic spacecraft that can travel to an asteroid, autonomously survey it, land on it or attach to it, extract the resources, and process them in a zero-gravity environment. The economic case is also challenging. The upfront investment is enormous, and the timeline for a return on that investment is long. This is why the first asteroid mining companies struggled to secure long-term funding. But the groundwork is being laid. Missions to survey and sample asteroids are providing a prospector's map of the most promising targets. Future advances in robotics and AI are making autonomous mining operations more feasible. The rise of reusable rockets is lowering the cost of getting the necessary equipment into space. The first real asteroid mining operations will likely be small scale, focusing on water extraction to produce propellant, but the long-term vision is to create a self-sustaining in-space economy. The metals mined from asteroids would not be brought back to Earth. They would be used in space to build larger spacecraft, space stations, and habitats. This is the critical step needed to truly break our dependence on Earth and become a spacefaring civilization. The sci-fi image of rugged miners working on a chunk of rock floating in the void is still a way off, but the robotic precursors to those miners are already being built and tested. Number 8. We can move things without touching them. In 2015, engineers at the University of Bristol demonstrated an acoustic tractor beam that could levitate and move multiple small objects simultaneously using a phased array of tiny ultrasound speakers. This technology is being developed for medical applications, such as delivering drugs to a specific location inside the body or manipulating kidney stones without invasive surgery. A technique called optical tweezers, which uses a highly focused laser beam to hold and move microscopic objects like living cells, bacteria, and DNA strands, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2018. Researchers have used this technique to study the forces of molecular motors and the elasticity of DNA. The tractor beam from Star Trek is one of the most famous pieces of sci-fi tech. It was a beam of energy that could grab hold of another starship and pull it in. The ability to manipulate objects at a distance without any physical contact has always been a sign of highly advanced technology. It seemed to violate the basic laws of physics as we understood them. But we have now developed real-life tractor beams. They do not work on the scale of starships, but they operate on the same fundamental principle of using waves to exert force on an object. The two most promising technologies are acoustic and optical levitation. Acoustic tractor beams use sound waves. The key is to use ultrasound, sound at frequencies too high for humans to hear. By using an array of many small ultrasound emitters, scientists can carefully control the shape of the sound field. They can create a low-pressure, acoustic hologram that acts like a cage of sound, trapping a small object. By moving the focal point of the sound waves, they can then move the trapped object through the air. Early demonstrations could only levitate very light objects like styrofoam beads, but the technology has advanced to the point where it can levitate and manipulate multiple objects at once with a high degree of control. The potential applications are exciting. In medicine, an acoustic tractor beam could be used to guide a drug-filled capsule through the body to a tumor, releasing the medicine only when it reaches its target. This would reduce the side effects of treatments like chemotherapy. They could also be used to manipulate tiny components inside a sealed, sterile environment or to assemble delicate micro machines without physical tools. Optical tweezers work on an even smaller scale. They use the momentum of photons in a laser beam to create a force. When a laser is focused to a tiny spot, small, transparent objects, like a biological cell, are drawn to the brightest part of the beam. It is like a tiny light-based trap. By moving the laser beam, scientists can precisely move the trapped cell. This has become an indispensable tool in biology and biophysics. It allows researchers to manipulate individual cells, stretch DNA molecules to measure their properties, and study the forces generated by the tiny protein motors that work inside our cells. We are not going to be towing spaceships with tractor beams anytime soon. The forces generated by these devices are still very small. But the principle has been proven. We have learned how to use invisible forces, sound, and light to hold and manipulate matter. It is another example of a technology that was once pure fantasy becoming a real and useful tool in our laboratories with the potential to transform medicine and manufacturing. The sci-fi dream of moving things with our minds is being replaced by the scientific reality of moving things with carefully controlled waves. Number 7, invisibility is no longer magic. In 2006, researchers at Duke University demonstrated the first working invisibility cloak. It was a device made of metamaterials that could steer microwaves around a small copper cylinder, making it appear as if the cylinder was not there to a microwave detector. A Canadian company, Hyperstealth Biotechnology, has developed a material it calls quantum stealth, which does not use power and bends light in the visible spectrum to make objects behind it disappear. It works by using a lenticular lens material, similar to the 3D pictures on a novelty postcard, to refract light from the background towards the observer. While not perfect, it can effectively conceal a person or even a vehicle in certain environments. The power of invisibility has fascinated humanity for centuries, appearing in myths, legends, and countless works of science fiction. From H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man to the cloaking devices on Romulan and Klingon starships in Star Trek and Harry Potter's invisibility cloak, the ability to become unseen has been portrayed as a source of immense power. For most of history, it was a purely magical or fantastical concept. Now, scientists and engineers are making real progress in the field of cloaking technology. They are not using magic, but a new class of engineered materials called metamaterial. A natural material gets its properties, like how it interacts with light, from the chemistry of its molecules. A metamaterial gets its properties from its physical structure. They are artificial materials engineered with tiny repeating patterns, smaller than the wavelength of the light or other electromagnetic waves they are designed to manipulate. The 2006 Duke experiment was a landmark proof of concept. The metamaterial cloak was designed to work with microwaves, which have a longer wavelength than visible light. It was made of concentric rings of copper strips printed on fiberglass sheets. When microwaves hit the cloak, the structure guided the waves around the central region where the object was hidden, and then reformed them on the other side. And to a detector, it was as if the waves had passed through empty space. The object inside was effectively invisible to microwaves. Making a cloak for visible light is much harder because the wavelength of light is much smaller, meaning the components of the metamaterial have to be nano-sized. It is also difficult to make a cloak that works for all colors of the light spectrum at once. But progress is being made. Researchers have developed various types of carpet cloaks that can hide a bump on a flat surface by making it appear perfectly flat. A different approach, like the one used by Hyperstealth, does not rely on complex metamaterials but on clever optics. The quantum stealth material is a sheet of plastic with a specific pattern of lenses embossed on it. It works by bending light from the background around the object being concealed. It does not make the object perfectly transparent, but it does create a powerful camouflage effect that can make it extremely difficult to see, especially from a distance. The most likely applications for this technology are military. A tank or an aircraft that is invisible to radar, a form of microwave cloaking, would have a huge advantage. Camouflage that can actively bend light to better match the background would make soldiers nearly impossible to spot. But there are also potential civilian uses. Invisibility cloaks could be used to design buildings that do not block cell phone signals, or to make parts of a structure like support columns in a concert hall seem to disappear so they do not obstruct the view. In microscopy, cloaking techniques could be used to allow scientists to view an object without the probe they are using to view it disturbing the sample. We are still a long way from a true Harry Potter-style invisibility cloak that you can throw over your shoulders, and that works perfectly from all angles. But the fundamental science is no longer fiction. We have demonstrated that we can bend and guide light and other electromagnetic waves in ways that were once thought impossible. We are learning how to control visibility itself. Number 6, we can suspend life and bring it back. Human beings cannot currently be put into long-term suspended animation, but the science is advancing. A medical procedure called emergency preservation and resuscitation (EPR) is being trialed for patients with traumatic, life-threatening injuries. It involves rapidly cooling the body to about 10 degrees Celsius 50 Fahrenheit by replacing the patient's blood with a cold saline solution. This induces a state of profound hypothermia where cellular activity nearly stops, buying surgeons a crucial hour or two to repair the injuries before brain damage occurs. Certain animals, like the wood frog, can survive being frozen solid. They produce natural cryoprotectants in their cells that prevent ice crystals from forming and shredding the cell membranes. The concept of cryosleep, or suspended animation, is a solution to one of the biggest problems in science fiction: the vast distances between stars. In movies like Alien and Avatar, crews are put into a state of deep sleep for journeys that take years or decades, waking up at their destination having barely aged. It is a way to make interstellar travel plausible within a human lifespan. While the sci-fi version of a sleep pod that can preserve a person for a century is still a fantasy, the underlying medical concept is very real. The field is called cryopreservation, and its short-term application is already being tested in emergency rooms. The EPR procedure is a form of medically induced suspended animation. The biggest enemy of a trauma patient who is bleeding to death is time. When the heart stops, the brain and other organs are deprived of oxygen, and irreversible damage begins within minutes. EPR is a way to pause. By rapidly cooling the body to a very low temperature, metabolic processes slow down to a crawl. The cell's need for oxygen plummets. This gives the surgical team a golden hour to find and repair the source of the bleeding without the pressure of a ticking clock. Once the repairs are made, the patient is slowly warmed up, and their blood is returned to their body. It is a high-risk, last-ditch effort, but it is based on the proven science that cooling preserves tissue. The biggest challenge in long-term preservation, especially freezing, is ice. When water freezes, it forms sharp, jagged ice crystals. Inside a living cell, these crystals act like tiny knives, puncturing membranes and destroying the delicate cellular machinery. This is why freezing is typically fatal. Nature, however, has found a solution. The wood frog can survive the winter frozen in a block of ice. Its heart stops, it stops breathing, and it is clinically dead, but in the spring it thaws out and hops away. It does this by flooding its cells with glucose, which acts as a natural antifreeze or cryoprotectant. It prevents the water inside the cells from freezing into large, damaging crystals. Scientists are trying to replicate this, the field of cryonics, which is the low-temperature preservation of legally dead people in the hope that future technology might be able to revive them, relies on this principle. Instead of just freezing a person, they first perfuse the body with cryoprotectant chemicals to prevent ice formation. The body is then cooled to the temperature of liquid nitrogen. Currently, this is a one-way trip. The technology to revive a cryopreserved person does not exist, and the cryoprotectant chemicals themselves are toxic. But research is progressing. Scientists have successfully vitrified a rabbit kidney, cooling it so rapidly with cryoprotectants that the water turns into a glass-like solid without forming crystals, and then warmed it up and transplanted it successfully. This was a major breakthrough, showing that a complex mammalian organ can survive the process. The sci-fi dream of cryosleep for space travel is still a very long way off, but the core ideas are being actively researched. We are learning how to slow down and even stop the processes of life and death at a cellular level. The emergency room procedure of today could be the ancestor of the cryopod of tomorrow. Number 5. The tunnels through space-time might be real. Wormholes, also known as Einstein-Rosen bridges, are a valid mathematical solution to the equations of Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity. These equations, published in 1915, describe how mass and energy warp the fabric of spacetime. A 2022 experiment using Google's Sycamore quantum processor did not create a real wormhole, but it did simulate a traversable wormhole on a quantum computer, showing that the information that went into one side of the simulation emerged from the other. To keep a hypothetical wormhole open long enough for something to pass through, it would require a form of exotic matter with negative energy density, a substance that has never been observed but is theoretically possible under the laws of quantum physics. Science fiction needed a way to get around the universe's ultimate speed limit, the speed of light. The distances between stars are so vast that even traveling at light speed, a trip to the nearest star system would take over 4 years. To enable stories of galactic empires and interstellar exploration, writers invented concepts like hyperspace, warp drive, and stargates. One of the most compelling of these ideas is the wormhole, a shortcut through spacetime, a tunnel that connects two distant points in the universe. Amazingly, this idea did not originate in fiction. It came directly from the physics of Einstein. In 1935, Albert Einstein and Nathan Rosen realized that the equations of general relativity allowed for the existence of bridges connecting two different points in spacetime. These became known as Einstein-Rosen bridges, or wormholes. They are a consequence of the way gravity warps space. Imagine spacetime as a sheet of paper. A massive object creates a dent in it. A very, very massive and dense object, like a black hole, could theoretically create a funnel so deep that it punches through and connects to another point on the sheet. For a long time, these were considered a mere mathematical curiosity. The original Einstein-Rosen bridges were found to be unstable. They would pinch off and collapse so quickly that not even a beam of light would have time to travel through them. They were not traversable, but in the 1980s, physicist Kip Thorne, who later served as the science advisor for the movie Interstellar, started to investigate whether a traversable wormhole was physically possible. He found that it was, but with a huge catch. To prop the throat of the wormhole open and prevent it from collapsing, you would need a substance with very strange properties. You would need matter with negative mass or negative energy density. Normal matter has positive mass and exerts a gravitational pull. This exotic matter would have negative mass and would be gravitationally repulsive. It would push space-time apart instead of pulling it together. We have never seen such matter, but some aspects of quantum field theory, like the Casimir effect, suggest that pockets of negative energy density are possible, at least on a microscopic scale. So, while we have no idea how to create or find this exotic matter in the quantities needed, the possibility of a traversable wormhole is not ruled out by our current understanding of physics. It has moved from being impossible to being merely stupendously difficult. You know, the recent experiment with Google's quantum computer was another fascinating step. While it was a simulation, not a real wormhole, it was a test of the holographic principle, an idea that connects the physics of gravity in a 3D space with the physics of quantum particles on a 2D surface. The fact that the simulation behaved as predicted lends more weight to these theories that bridge the gap between gravity and quantum mechanics, the very theories that underpin the concept of wormholes. Well, we are not opening stargates in our labs, but the idea of a wormhole is no longer just a convenient plot device for sci-fi writers. It is a subject of serious theoretical physics research. It is a genuine, albeit highly speculative, possibility allowed for by our best theories of the universe. The sci-fi dream of instantaneous travel between the stars has a foundation, however shaky, in real science. Number 4, we have found thousands of other worlds. The first confirmed discovery of an exoplanet, a planet orbiting a star other than our sun, was in 1992. As of late 2023, over 5,500 exoplanets have been confirmed in more than 4,000 different star systems. NASA's Kepler Space Telescope, launched in 2009, was responsible for the majority of these discoveries. It stared at one patch of sky for 4 years, monitoring the brightness of 150,000 stars, looking for the tiny periodic dip in a star's light caused by a planet passing in front of it. An estimated 1 in 5 sun-like stars has an Earth-sized planet in its habitable zone, the region where temperatures could allow for liquid water to exist on the surface. For most of human history, the question of whether there were other worlds like ours was a matter of philosophical and fictional speculation. Science fiction was filled with a rich tapestry of alien planets, from the desert world of Iraqis in Dune to the jungle moon of Pandora in Avatar. But until very recently, we had no evidence that any such planets existed. The 9, now 8 planets in our solar system were the only ones we knew. That has all changed in the last 30 years. We are living through a golden age of planetary discovery. The detection of exoplanets has gone from a monumental challenge to a routine astronomical observation. We have found a staggering diversity of worlds out there, many of them stranger than anything science fiction imagined. We have found hot Jupiters, gas giants orbiting so close to their stars that their years last only a few days, and their atmospheres are heated to thousands of degrees. We have found super-Earths, rocky planets larger than our own. We have found planets orbiting 2 stars at once, like the fictional Tatooine. And we have even found rogue planets, worlds that have been ejected from their star systems and now drift alone in the cold darkness of interstellar space. The primary methods for finding these planets are indirect. The transit method, used by Kepler, looks for the dimming of starlight as a planet crosses its face. The radial velocity method looks for the tiny wobble in a star's position caused by the gravitational tug of an orbiting planet. These methods tell us the planet's size and mass, from which we can infer its density and whether it is likely to be rocky or gaseous. The next great challenge is to study the atmospheres of these worlds. This is where the James Webb Space Telescope JUICE is a game changer. When a planet transits its star, a tiny amount of the starlight passes through the planet's atmosphere. By analyzing the spectrum of that light, astronomers can look for the chemical fingerprints of different gases. JWEST has already detected carbon dioxide, water vapor, and sulfur dioxide in the atmospheres of distant exoplanets. The ultimate goal is to find a pale blue dot like our own. The search is on for an Earth-sized, rocky planet in the habitable zone of a sun-like star. Finding such a planet would be incredible. The next step would be to analyze its atmosphere for biosignatures gases like oxygen and methane that, in combination, would be a strong indicator of the presence of life. Based on the statistics from the Kepler mission, we can estimate that there could be as many as 40 billion Earth-sized planets in the habitable zones of stars within our Milky Way galaxy alone. The universe is not just filled with stars, it is filled with planets. The sci-fi vision of a galaxy teeming with worlds is now our scientific reality. We do not know if any of them host life, but for the first time in history, we have a realistic map of where to look and the tools to begin the search. Number 3, we are creating life from scratch. In 2010, scientists at the J. Craig Venter Institute created the first synthetic self-replicating bacterial cell. They synthesized the entire genome of a bacterium from scratch using chemicals in the lab, and then transplanted this artificial DNA into a host cell. The cell booted up and began to reproduce, creating a colony of cells controlled entirely by the man-made genome. In 2021, researchers created the first living robots called xenobots from the stem cells of a frog. These millimeter-sized biological machines could move, work together in swarms, and even self-heal when damaged. They were designed by an AI and then assembled by scientists. The story of Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley in 1818, is the foundational myth of artificial life. It is a cautionary tale about the hubris of a scientist who creates a sentient being and the tragic consequences that follow. For centuries, the idea of creating life in a laboratory was the stuff of horror and science fiction. Life was something that could only come from other life. That fundamental axiom of biology is no longer true. We have entered the era of synthetic biology, a field that aims to design and construct new biological parts, devices, and systems that do not exist in the natural world. It is the application of engineering principles to biology. The 2010 creation of a synthetic cell nicknamed Cynthia was a watershed moment. It proved that DNA is the software of life, and that we can write our own. The team at the Venter Institute read the genetic code of a simple bacterium, typed that code into a computer, and then used DNA synthesis machines to print out the physical DNA piece by piece. They then stitched these pieces together to create the full genome. When this synthetic genome was placed into a different species of bacterium whose own DNA had been removed, the cell's machinery began reading the new artificial instructions. It started producing a new set of proteins, and after a while transformed itself into the species encoded by the synthetic DNA. It was a new form of life, a computer-designed organism. The potential applications of this technology are vast. We could design microorganisms to produce biofuels, pharmaceuticals, or new materials. We could create bacteria that can clean up oil spills or detect diseases. By writing our own genetic code, we can program living cells to perform useful tasks for us. The creation of xenobots represents a different, but equally profound approach. These are not single-celled organisms. They are novel, multicellular life forms. Scientists used a supercomputer to run an evolutionary algorithm that designed tiny creatures out of simulated skin and heart cells that could perform a specific task, like moving in a straight line. The AI came up with bizarre and non-intuitive designs. The scientists then took real frog stem cells, separated them into skin and heart muscle cells, and assembled them, cell by cell, into the designs the AI had created. The heart cells, which naturally contract, acted like tiny motors propelling the xenobots through the water. These xenobots are not robots in the traditional sense. They are living biological machines made of cells. They are biodegradable, can self-heal, and are a completely new form of life that does not exist in nature. This power to create life from scratch brings with it immense ethical questions. What are the risks of releasing a synthetic organism into the environment? Could it have unforeseen consequences for existing ecosystem? What is the moral status of these artificial life forms? The xenobots raise questions about what it even means to be an organism. They are alive, but they are not the product of evolution. They are designed artifacts. The line between life and machine is becoming increasingly blurred. We are not just editing life anymore, we are writing it. We are not just observing life, we are designing it. The Frankenstein story is no longer just a metaphor. We have gained the power to create, and with it comes the responsibility for our creations. Number 2, the flying car is finally here, sort of. As of 2023, over a dozen companies are developing and testing electric vertical takeoff and landing eVTOL aircraft, often called flying cars or air taxis. Joby Aviation, a leading company in the field, has a prototype that can fly over 150 miles on a single charge at speeds up to 200 mph. In 2021, the company Aleph Aeronautics unveiled a prototype of a true flying car that looks like a car, can drive on the road, and has also received a limited FAA airworthiness certificate for flight testing. The city of Paris is aiming to have an eVTOL air taxi service operational in time for the 2024 Olympic Games. The flying car is one of the most enduring promises of a future that never quite arrived. From the Jetsons to Blade Runner, pop culture has been filled with images of personal vehicles soaring through the skies of futuristic cities. For decades, the reality was a collection of clumsy, impractical prototypes that were bad cars and worse airplanes. The dream of a flying car seemed destined to remain a dream, but a convergence of several key technologies is finally making it a reality, though perhaps not in the way we always imagined. The revolution is being driven by electric propulsion, advanced battery technology, and sophisticated flight control software. The new generation of vehicles are called eVTOLs. They do not have the single noisy combustion engine and rotor of a helicopter. Instead, they use multiple small electric rotors. This approach, called distributed electric propulsion, has several advantages. It is much quieter, it is more efficient, and it is safer. If one or two rotors fail, the others can compensate. These vehicles are essentially large, human-carrying drones. They are being designed to operate as air taxis in urban areas. The idea is that you would use an app to summon an eVTOL, much like you would an Uber. It would pick you up from a vertiport on the roof of a building and fly you directly to another vertiport near your destination, bypassing all the traffic on the streets below. This is the vision being pursued by major companies like Joby, Whisk Aero, backed by Boeing, and Archer Aviation. They have working full-scale prototypes that are undergoing rigorous flight testing. Regulatory hurdles are still a major challenge. Certifying a completely new type of aircraft for safe passenger flight is a long and expensive process. But aviation authorities around the world are working with these companies to develop the necessary regulations. While most of the focus is on air taxis, some companies are still pursuing the original dream of a true flying car-ass, a vehicle that you can drive on the road, park in your garage, and then take off vertically from your driveway. The Aleph Aeronautics model is an intriguing example. It uses a unique design where the car's body is a mesh, allowing air to flow through it. 8 propellers are housed inside the body. For vertical takeoff, they lift the car straight up. To fly forward, the entire car then tilts 90 degrees onto its side, so the driver is facing forward through a bubble canopy. We are not going to see skies crowded with personal flying cars tomorrow. The first services will be limited, expensive, and operated by professional pilots. But the technology is no longer a fantasy. The prototypes are flying. The investment is pouring in. And cities are beginning to plan for the infrastructure needed to support this new form of transportation. The long-awaited age of the flying car is dawning, not as a personal vehicle for everyone, but as a new layer of urban mass transit. Number 1. We are all connected by an invisible web. In 1965, Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel, predicted that the number of transistors on a microchip would double approximately every 2 years. This prediction, known as Moore's Law, held true for over 50 years and was the driving force behind the exponential growth of computing power. The first transatlantic telephone cable, laid in 1956, could carry 36 phone calls at once. The fiber optic cables that now cross the oceans can carry tens of millions of phone calls and terabits of data per second. The Starlink satellite constellation, operated by SpaceX, aims to provide global high-speed internet coverage using a network of thousands of small satellites in low Earth orbit. As of 2023, there are over 4,500 Starlink satellites in orbit. Science fiction often depicted futures with ubiquitous instant communication. In Star Trek, characters could talk to each other from anywhere on a planet or from a starship in orbit using a small handheld communicator. In 2001, A Space Odyssey, a character makes a video call from a space station to his daughter on Earth, a scene that seemed incredibly futuristic in 1968. These technologies were portrayed as a natural part of a future society, a seamless web of information that connected everyone. We now live in that future. The technologies that enable it have become so integrated into our lives that we barely notice them. But the global communications network we have built is one of the most complex and astonishing engineering achievements in human history. It started with the microprocessor and the relentless advance of Moore's law, which made computers smaller, cheaper, and exponentially more powerful. This led to the personal computer, and then the smartphone, a device with more computing power than all of NASA had in 1969, when it put a man on the moon. Parallel to this was the development of the network itself. The internet began as a small, resilient network designed to connect a few universities and military research labs. It has grown into a global network of networks, a web of fiber optic cables, cellular towers, and satellites that connects billions of people and devices. The sheer scale of this infrastructure is hard to comprehend. There are over 1 million kilometers of submarine fiber optic cables crisscrossing the ocean floors, carrying the vast majority of international internet traffic as pulses of light. We have built a physical network that literally wraps the entire planet. Wireless technology then took this connectivity and made it mobile. The cellular network allows us to access this global web of information from a device in our pocket, almost anywhere we go. Now, satellite constellations like Starlink are filling in the gaps, bringing high-speed internet to rural and remote areas that have never had it before. The goal of a truly global, ubiquitous network is within reach. The Sci-Fi communicator is a reality. We have smartphones that can make voice and video calls, send messages, and access the sum of human knowledge from almost anywhere. The video call from the space station is now a routine occurrence on the International Space Station, and a commonplace tool for business meetings and family chats on Earth. This total connectivity has reshaped our societies, our economies, and even our brains. It has enabled global collaboration, social movements, and new forms of entertainment. It has also created new problems, misinformation, cyber warfare, and the erosion of privacy. We have built the invisible web that science fiction predicted. We are the first generation of humans to live in a world where we are all constantly connected to each other and to a vast global repository of information. This is perhaps the most profound sci-fi prediction of all to have come true, because it is the one that enables so many of the others. AI, the metaverse, surveillance, all of it runs on this planetary scale communications network that we have built in just a few short decades.